Every year, thousands of human remains are found in the United States, and in one of every 4 instances, authorities can't identify the body. That's starting to change. I'm Dave Killen, co-host of The Unidentifieds, a new limited series podcast from The Oregonian and Oregon Live. We go deep into several cold cases and explain the science that's helping experts give these long-forgotten people their names back. Look for The Unidentifieds after you've finished listening to this podcast. Subscribe to The Unidentifieds on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politti and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the pod, which we've decided to rename Spencer for Hire. There's a colon in that. Spencer is spelled with an S. Do you even know what I'm talking about, Fonseca? Do you know what Spencer for Hire even is?
I literally thought you were just making a joke. This is a reference?
This is a great 1980s television show. Great might be strong. It's a 1980s television show about a guy who was for hire, Spencer. He was, he did tasks for you.
Well, I guess we should have seen this coming then.
Good show. Right. Yes. All right. It's just me and Brian today. We gave Lanny the day off because we're just going to sit here and scream at each other about Cam Spencer and figured the two of us could handle that on our own. All right. Here's where I want to start this with Cam Spencer, which is what I kind of find, I don't know, a little flabbergasting, but we spent roughly 18 months writing that this was eventually going to happen, that someone was going to leave because of NIL money. And then when it happened, half the fan base flipped out like, I can't believe this happened. And it's just sort of amazing. The coaches warned us about it. The collective warned us about it. I mean, the national pundits warned us about it. We've seen it happen in a million other places. And still it was like a punch to the gut of the Rutgers collective soul here over what happened with Cam Spencer taking money, leaving the program. Why don't we just start here? Why don't you just take us through what happened to the best of your knowledge and where we are today?
Sure. And I think just to kind of explain the hysteria, I think what adds to it is the fact that Cam is probably the last or one of the last guys people would have expected to leave. This is a guy who is not on social media, who, when I called someone asking about the situation, said, that doesn't sound like Cam. A guy who we penciled in on next season's roster, right? So I think that really adds to the surprise. Well, I understand this entire offseason, I think last season, offseason as well, a lot of, if not every player on the Rutgers roster, I shouldn't say every player, every major player on the Rutgers roster was tampered with, had overtures sent to them, opportunities presented to them, and Rutgers generally avoided it. They got to the transfer window closing last week, which meant that any player that wasn't a grad transfer couldn't enter the portal. And I think the program really breathed a sigh of relief because there were some shaky moments there, but they looked like they had avoided disaster again for 2 straight off seasons. And then on Friday, the bombshell drops that Cam Spencer's transferring. I don't know the intimate details because NIL, and we can probably dive into this later, is a situation where no one really knows anything and numbers are being thrown around. It's like whose line is it anyway? None of it matters. It's all just kind of a bunch of noise. I couldn't tell you with certainty of anything, right? But what I could say pretty comfortably is that Cam Spencer is transferring somewhere else. NIL appears to be the main factor because even if I tried to come up with another reason, I couldn't. He has a great relationship with Steve Peichel. He had a defined role within the team that probably was going to get even better with the addition of a guard who could actually create space for him. I think at the end of the day, it was money. And like you said, the alarm bells have been kind of sounding for a bit here, but if it's one thing to hear it's possible, it's another thing to actually have it happen. And I can understand the hysteria a bit because things could look a bit bleak without Cam Spencer.
Right. And but even that was kind of misguided because what turned out, and I think what happened, you talked about it, and I think people didn't understand that the portal closes, yes, but for grad transfers, they can leave and move at any point in time. And I think that made him, and this is just trying to connect the dots from the outside, that made Cam Spencer or players like him more attractive, more valuable, so to speak, that the doors closed, rosters aren't set for the most part across the country. And if there's someone who needs Cam Spencer, who, by the way, was the leading scorer on a Big Ten basketball team that made the postseason. right? So like there's some value to Cam Spencer, 43% shooter, the highest efficiency, offensive efficiency by far in the team. And I think that's what happened. Without knowing what happened, I think suddenly he realized his worth.
Yeah, and if that's the case, I don't know if he goes to the Rutgers Business School, but it's a great advertisement for a guy with a very shrewd business mind to know that his value skyrocketed overnight. I know people are upset about the timing of the thing. I don't blame Cam Spencer whatsoever for doing what's best for him. This is kind of I understand it from, well, again, we'll dive into this later, but like there's very multi-nuanced different perspectives in this. I don't blame Cam Spencer at all for what he did. He's maximizing his personal value at a time where I don't know, he's going to chase a professional basketball career. I don't know if he'll ever be able to make the money he's going to make now, wherever he ends up going. So I don't blame him at all. And I guess depending on where he lands, we'll go to a place where he probably knows he goes to the NCAA tournament.
All right, let's talk about the one thing I think that aggravated people more than anything else based on, what I can only describe as a buttload of social media interactions over the weekend, an equally sized buttload of texts on our text service and emails. People are convinced that Cam Spencer did Rutgers wrong by not offering Rutgers the opportunity to match whatever money he got. And I want to be clear on something here, that we don't know that this is what happened, right? This is something that Geo Baker threw out there on social media. I was a little surprised to see it out there because they did put a target on Cam Spencer when he did that. So we don't know if this was the case or not. So let me just pose it to you. I'm just curious what you think before we go into a long discussion here. Do you think that's something that Cam Spencer was obligated to do when he had an offer to go in there and say to Steve Pikiell, hey, I got this money? I mean, what is your take on that?
If I were offered an astronomical raise by another company, I would not. I mean, I guess I'd walk into my manager's office and tell him. But if I knew that they had no chance of matching, why would I waste everybody's time and do that? And also, what if I'm dead set on going to this other company? I could love the company I'm at a lot, but if I'm dead set on going to the other one, why would I even bring that up? So again, I don't know. I'm with you. I don't know if he did that or not. I don't even know what that means. But yeah, I think it's kind of it's not nowhere near as big of a deal as I think a lot of people made it out to be. I agree.
I came back to this, and this is, and you kind of touched on it, but like if the New York Times came to me tomorrow, yes, I'm going down a slippery slope here already with this. If the New York Times came to me tomorrow and said, we're going to give you a 10% raise, I'd be like, well, I really love my job. I've been here 25 years. I got to think about that. And I'd have a discussion with my bosses about it and a decision to make. If they came in tomorrow and say, we're tripling your salary, I would go into the office with my laptop and cell phone and shake their hands. Like, that's just very simple. And I think the latter, based on everything I know about it, I think the latter is far more likely to have happened. And so where I think fans are misguided, and there are many ways, I wrote down 5 different things here about the match that bothered me. But the first one is very simple. Like, Rutgers has had him in the program for a year and set his value, right? So I don't know what that number is, but that's the first thing that had to happen in this equation, that they decided Cam Spencer is going to make X. Like, that's what Cam Spencer is worth to Rutgers. And then someone came in and blew it away. So why are we ignoring that part of the equation where Rutgers had an opportunity to say, okay, Cam, look, you're our leading scorer, we're going to pay you Y, and instead said, well, we're going to pay you X. I mean, I just don't understand. You follow me on that, Brian? It's we in this discussion about, well, Cam should have asked for a match. People are ignoring the fact that it's the value was established by Rutgers.
Correct. They had, like you said, they've had a huge head start in being able to pay him as much as they want or can. And to your point, the values in NIL, as I've touched on before, are impossible to know. Like, there are numbers being thrown out there that are insane. Like Hunter Dickinson, apparently I had heard during the season, was making $800,000 or $1 million, and then he goes on a podcast after the year saying he barely made 6 figures. I have no idea who's telling the truth. We don't know the values absolutely for sure. But it's not. It's my guess, my educated guess, is that whatever Cam Spencer is making at his new school or will make is stratospheres ahead of whatever he would make here at Rutgers, right? So I do think if that's the case, if the difference is that vast, to your point, there's no use in having that conversation because it's not. It's fruitless.
And the other thing I've heard a couple of times, more than a couple of times, about a dozen times, was, well, Rutgers could have easily matched. And I'm just telling you. I've got a year's worth of reporting telling me that that's not true. That's just not easily, to me, easily matched means, oh, we've got this big pool of money here. Cam, you got offered what? Okay. Well, here you go. Well, it'll be in your, well, I don't even know how did they get a paycheck, or I don't even know how they get paid, but yeah, we got this big, that doesn't exist. Like that's, there's no big pool. There's no big vat of money in the back of the rack where Steve Peichel is doling out, like Jesse Pinkman at the end of Breaking Bad. He's not throwing these packs of money out the car window. That doesn't exist. All that aside, like, whatever X amount of money that Rutgers has, they've already earmarked for players. And I am no doubt that a huge chunk of that is going to go to keeping their center, their most important player, Cliff. Right. I mean, so, the idea that Rutgers could have easily matched, I just don't think that's true.
I agree. Yeah. And I think John Newman alluded to this in an interview that I did with him over the weekend, but coaches are kind of working with the salary cap now, right? You got to kind of an unofficial salary cap. They have X amount of money to work with, and they have to allocate those resources based on what they think, makes the most sense for the team, which means that not everybody's mouth can get fed unless you are the coach of Miami and you have John Ruiz feeding everybody money. And when players complain about publicly not making enough NIL money, he can bring out $800,000 or whatever he allegedly gave Isaiah Wong, right? That doesn't happen here at Rutgers, and it doesn't happen for most schools, right? It doesn't happen here at Rutgers for myriad reasons that have been true for decades, right? But the truth is, yes, there's no war chest of money, and in no universe could Rutgers have easily matched anything Cam Spencer is getting. And honestly, probably a lot of players on the open market, if they had tested it, I'm not sure they could have matched it for a lot of them. And
you could also make a strong case, and this is also getting overlooked, that Steve Peichel shouldn't have matched. Like, that's the other side of this. It's like, so Cam Spencer has got if he has an offer now, it's likely an illegal tampering, right? It's breaking rules. Like someone had to come to him or someone in his network of people and say, go into the transfer portal in a couple of weeks, come out, we'll pay X. If that's what happened, and I don't know that's what happened. Again, we have not been able to reach Cam Spencer. No one's talked to Cam Spencer. But if that's what happened, then that's an offer that has broken NCAA rules. So you're telling me that like he's supposed to go in there and say, hey, look, I got this offer, coach, that I'm not supposed to have. Can you imagine? Like Steve Peichel would be in every right to say, look, we're not going to do that. Like, because then that opens the door to somebody else coming in. Like this just is like a slippery slope. So I'm like, I just don't know how that works on the Rutgers end either.
Yeah, no, I agree. Although I am a bit the word illegal tampering is kind of, everyone's tampering. If everyone's tampering, is it illegal? Is it really that
technically? Yeah, I mean, sure, but you make a great point. It's certainly not enforceable.
Sure. If Cam Spencer goes to Steve Peichel, says X schools offer me X money, what, he's going to record the conversation, call the NCAA? They'll probably laugh in his face anyway, right? So that's another thing. But yes, if Rutgers couldn't match the initial offer, imagine a bidding war. Like they wouldn't. And again, they have limited money. They have a lot of decisions to make with that money. And unless someone at Rutgers wins the lottery or invents vitamin water, this is going to be the truth for the foreseeable future. So they have to make decisions based on what they have and the projection of what they'll have.
Invents vitamin water. That's very funny. All right, let's go to that. That's a good transition because John Newman, the head of the Knights of the Raritan collective, made news this weekend as well from, I think, Sicily. So you guys, I want to know how dedicated your collective's head is, that he is sitting in a vacation of a lifetime, talking to Fonseca. Let me just tell you something. If I'm in Sicily, Brian, I love you. We've worked together for years now. Don't call me when I'm in Italy. I just want to put that out there to begin with, right?
Well, two things. One, my name is kind of Italian, so it's probably fit the ambiance of where he is. Two, he was in Rome, because I remember telling him,
Rome. Okay.
When you're combating all the texts you're getting, imagine, channel the energy of the ancient gladiators in the Colosseum. I remember telling him that. And three, he called me. All right, let's keep this clear.
I called you from Rome. I love it. That's even better. I
don't interrupt people's vacations. All right. If you call me while I'm in Portugal this summer, I will be very upset. I will answer, but I will be very upset if I can get reception in my father's very tiny village amongst the sheep.
That's just great. And you know what it's going to be? It's going to be something like this that we're going to have to call you in Portugal. It's going to be hilarious. All right. So John Newman came out and what I thought was, a number on back of the napkin kind of numbers about what Rutgers is going to need going forward, and that it's $10 million a year. Give me the breakdown. What did John say about this, and how this works as far as what he thinks the future of the NIL situation is?
Sure. And I keep repeating myself. This is an inexact science. These are all estimates, but based on conversations he's had with coaches at Rutgers, with coaches at other schools, they have relationships with. John says they have a very open line of communication with these coaches. His estimation is $10 million a year in NIL revenue to be split roughly $6 to $7 million on football, $2 million on basketball, and then the remainder on wrestling and women's basketball. Women's basketball is making an absolute killing this offseason. I don't know how much NIL has to do with it, but they're making a great killing there, just an aside. Right. Rick Geno has said publicly, I think you wrote this column last summer, that he needs millions. I don't know if he's ever specified publicly at least how many millions, but that number sounds about right. That's a lot of money, especially when Newman tells me that in their first year they have about 1.5 million. And again, I have not verified those numbers. I have not seen the books. I don't know if that's all cash on hand. I don't know if that's all pledges. I don't know how much of the split is there. I don't know. But if that number is true, and even if it's on the conservative side, that's not quite 10 million. So
no, right. Yeah. And he made the point to you that it's not sitting in some Swiss bank account collecting interest. It comes in and it goes out pretty quickly.
Correct. Yes. I imagine they have a deal, or they've pledged to have a deal with every player on the football and men's basketball teams. That'll make the money drop pretty quick. I think that's what he said. That was the exact quote, right? When the money comes in, it comes out pretty quickly. So
right. And this is fascinating. This is a fascinating debate. And this is got an email from, like, all I can describe it as like a 40-year diehard, like one of the perfect Rutgers fans. And I'm not going to name him. He probably would let me, but I'm guessing that everyone who listens to this podcast has encountered the great fan. And he asked me a question. It's like a very simple, like, he says, I'm retired. I've supported Rutgers. I give scholarships for football, men's basketball, women's soccer. I've got a set number of money that I can do this. So, and his question was simply, so assuming for a moment that the pot of money that goes to Rutgers is a fixed size, should we reduce donations to these programs and direct money to eternal NIL affiliated scholarships? This is the central question in Piscataway right now, right? I mean, this is it. This is the heart of it. Like, and I think, I know that Rutgers, the administration, Pat Hobbs, everyone in that side of the building is saying no to that. Or at least not encouraging people to do that for probably some obvious reasons. I think the coaches right now have reached the point that their answer to that question might be yes. Do you think that's the correct characterization?
I think the answer to that question from coaches is hell yes. Please give me as much NIL money as I need, because I'm drowning over here, because everyone else has all this money. I do feel for the fans. I really do. And I could understand the complete desperation they're feeling in that they're giving this money and they're just watching, stuff like this happen. The reality is that, as Knights of the Rant said, all these small contributions they have, these monthly $10, $20, $50 memberships, they all matter. They all count. I'm not discounting that. But when you're going against the St. John's, which has, again, the vitamin water guy who's worth $1 billion and could cut a $10 million check off dividends alone, that's just sitting on his Swiss bank account or his bank account in the Maldives or whatever. He probably has multiple bank accounts in the Maldives. Right. It's impossible for small donors to compete with that. So I could totally understand the absolute desperation that fans feel in this situation. Of course. Right. And I can understand also the administration side of that. As we've touched on before, Rutgers for decades historically has been a very small donor base, and money has been very difficult to raise for every project, for facilities, for everything, right? So adding in
university-wide, historically, 50 years of this is a problem forever.
Yeah. Sure. Yes. And we could delve into the reasons why. That'll take a whole other 3 episodes of the podcast anyway. But the point is, there's not a lot of money to be going around, and to add another revenue stream that needs money and needs it desperately makes for a very difficult situation.
Yeah. And I don't know what this podcast is more likely to win a Pulitzer Prize for commentary than the collective is to bring in $10 million. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, it's just not going to happen. I mean, and I like our podcast, Brian. I think, maybe in the right category. If there is a podcast, if there's a Pulitzer category for best Big Ten podcast, football, basketball podcast. We've got a shot. I think we got a shot to be a finalist at least, but we're not going to win. We're not going to win. The point being that they're not going to raise $10 million. I mean, it's just not. They've seen nothing in the history of Rutgers athletics to make me think that that's going to happen. So I don't know. So the question is like, what now is the answer? Like, what do you do? And I guess what you're doing is you're doing what these coaches have had to do: find a way to adapt, plug holes when you can, and hope for the best. Right? I mean, I just don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep plugging away, right? Keep trying, because I mean, as much as you are behind when you are trying, imagine if they're not trying and they didn't have this 1.5 million or however much money they have in the coffers, right? They'd be, infinite steps behind, right? So you gotta just keep plugging away. Again, you gotta hope the lottery hits somewhere in Piscataway. You gotta hope that I don't know, maybe an NFL alum donates some money. You gotta go through the couch cushions. They find corporate sponsors. I know that's something that the Knights of the Raritan are looking to do. They have to try to convince, and that's another issue here at Rutgers in that they're in a pro market. We've heard this 100 times. There are people that would rather they spend money on the Giants, the Jets, the Mets, the Yankees, the Nets, the Knicks, everything. Whereas if you go to Lincoln, Nebraska, Nebraska is the Giants, the Jets, the Yankees, the Mets, the Rangers. They're all that together, right?
Yep.
So it's hard to convince. It's a lot easier to convince local businesses there to contribute to the Huskers than it is here at Rutgers. But you got to figure it out. You're in the Big Ten, you're competing, and if you want to be a competitive program, you got to figure it out. That no one is crying for you in the Big Ten office. So I don't know how. Not. I'm not paid anywhere near enough to figure that out. But someone's got to figure it out if Rutgers is going to have any prayer of maintaining competitive in this environment.
All right, let's talk about the impact on the team. We haven't gotten there yet. I was thinking about it, and you to tell me I'm wrong on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being it doesn't matter and 10 being absolutely catastrophic. I am closer to the middle of that range than I was when I first heard this news. Just thinking about, where this team is headed. Give me a number from 1 to 10, where you think it is.
I'd say 7.5 to 8.
You think it's that high? Okay.
I think Cliff is easily the most important player, and if he does not come back, then I could really start sounding alarm bells. I think that team is in a very difficult spot.
Of course. Yep.
Cam is a very important player in that he had the best 3-point shooting season that this program has had in a decade, and they still were in the bottom quarter in the country in 3-point shooting percentage. They better hope that Gavin Griffiths, who apparently is a sharpshooter in high school, is the reincarnation of Larry Bird and be able to shoot very well for 3 to kind of keep up the already bad pace they have of shooting threes. If Gavin Griffiths isn't able to shoot, 37%, 40% on threes, then they're going to be really bad shooting, right? And that's as we've discussed ad nauseum here, offense is very much a struggle for this program. They've added Noah Fernandes, sure, in the out of the portal. They've added Gavin Griffiths out of high school. They should be able to help, but to lose a really good 3-point shooter in a program that hasn't had any good 3-point shooters recently, it's a blow. It's an undeniable blow, and I think people maybe try to downplay it, saying that he doesn't provide the athleticism to drive to the basket. He could be a bit of a liability defensively at times, although he was a pretty good stealer. I just think it's a blow. I think you lose a starting guard on a team that's not very deep, that can't shoot very well. I'm not sure how you could spin it. Is it not being a blow? And especially, Here's where I agree with them about the timing. It's May, and the portal's closed, and the pickings are slim. There are not many 40% shooters in the portal. I'm not sure how they're going to replace him, but they're going to need to add a body somehow.
Right. And that, and fans are, and I think this is just misguided, but fans are vilifying him for that. And the only thing I have to say about that is that, there was a time not very long ago that if Cam Spencer's mom got cancer and he wanted to drive her to her chemotherapy sessions, that he would have to ask for permission and might not be granted. Like, this is just, look, the power has been 100% in the other direction for forever. And the idea now that finally these guys have free range of movements for whatever reason they want, I don't know. I just cannot feel bad for the coaches who have to deal with it. I just don't. I mean, this is the correction that has been overdue forever. So boo him if you want. Like, I guess that's like, he's a professional athlete, I'm gonna head into the rack, and okay, great. That is you pay for the ticket. But I'm just telling you, if he was your son and he made this decision, you might be like, okay, that's just the other side of it.
Sure. I'm with you. I think it would be awesome if Cam goes to a place that he does end up going to the rack and he gets booed to oblivion. That would be awesome. great sports moment, I think, really. I mean, to be a sports villain, I think he'd love that too. I think
he might love it. You're absolutely right. He might love it.
Relish that moment. I'm telling you. The interesting thing, and not to dive too deep into the political aspect of this, but it's very funny that we live in a country that's very capitalist and very free market and all these things. Everyone's individualistic, except for your sports team. Everyone has to do greater good and stay with the team, and be part of a make sacrifices for my team, not for other teams. Fernandes could leave UMass and come to Rutgers. That's perfectly fine, but don't you dare leave Rutgers.
Right. And then now we're going to start celebrating. We got guys in that team that didn't ask for a penny. Well, number one, we don't know that to be true. Again, I think that's another fallacy. And number two, I mean, is that a sign of a higher level of character that I just don't understand. I just don't understand that. Why does that make someone a better person that they want to play for free? I just don't get that either.
It doesn't make you a better person. It makes you a chump.
You can make a strong case about that. Absolutely. Or motivated. It's okay if you're motivated by something else. I love Rutgers. I want to stay here. I recognize that my 30-year relationship, 40, 50-year relationship with this place is more important than a 6-figure payout today. That is the decision you're making long-term about your life. That's a decision that Geo Baker's capitalizing on, that you're going to see a handful of players who are going to recognize that. But I'm just telling you that that's not everyone's decision. And if you're vilifying him for taking the money, I think you're just crazy.
Yes.
All right.
Look, it's not an exact comparison, but 99% of the people that are talking about this, if they were offered a significant raise to go somewhere else from their job, none of them would say, but I'm loyal to my company. I just love Xerox. I can't dare go to Gillette or, whatever. It's bad comparisons. But my point being that 99% of people would do the exact same thing in this situation. And just because he plays for your favorite college doesn't mean he should abide by some different arbitrary rules to make you feel better. Right.
Right. Absolutely. All right. That was good. Good segment on this. We're going to dive into the insider questions. Very passionate responses to this topic in the insider. Thank you for subscribing as always. And most of the questions were about NIL, so I'm just going to go through them here and see what we got. So this is another logistical question. I was, and I really didn't think I was trashing Rutgers, to be honest with the column I wrote, but I was, why are you trashing Rutgers if you didn't give the chance the program to match? We talked about that. But the next question was, are we supposed to check on every player daily to take their temperature? That's not possible. I'm just telling you, that's that you might say it's not possible. And that's the climate. That's it. That's the climate we're in. When the portal opens, Brian, when it opens, that's all anyone talks about for 2 months. That's it. That's the entire sport of college basketball right now. We think March Madness and the brackets are the big thing. The players are looking at this. I just don't know any other way to put it. This is it.
We have athletic departments putting together graphics saying kids are coming back to school.
Right? Yes, great point. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
This is the reality. I'm not sure what rock people have been living under for the past year. It's only going to get worse until there are guardrails being put up. Shout out Dan Wetzel. Guardrails, until those are being brought up, nothing's going to change, right? And do you trust the NCAA to do anything to limit this?
Of course not. No, because they've sat and they tried to prevent it from happening for 75 years. So, that's the problem. Yeah, they've shown no sign.
Right. So this is what it is. And coaches are going to have to talk to their players regularly, maintain those relationships they claim to always have with their players, kind of check it out. And look, sometimes players aren't going to be honest, right? Sometimes players are going to pretend like they're happy, and then they're going to have they're going to have their AAU coach or their parents or whoever talking to other schools about potential packages. That, it is what it is, right? But this is the new reality. And look, again, I don't blame fans for being frustrated. I don't. It's totally reasonable to be upset about this news. It is what it is. It's what's happening now, and for the foreseeable future, until something changes. It's just the new reality of college basketball.
All right, so we got about 6 questions on the something changes part. Rocco in Florida. Obviously, there are schools who cheat and also have a lot more money than Rutgers does. My question is, do you foresee a situation where schools similar to Rutgers force changes, or the NCAA finally does its job and levels the playing field for all schools? Brandon in Branchburg, shouldn't the NCAA reinstate the rule that players are required to stay a year if transferring? I know it's different in Cam's case because he's a grad transfer, but does did the NCAA want all these moving pieces? Of course, the answer is no to that part. The first part is, I think, and I've heard this after I wrote the column, I must have gotten a half dozen calls, and every person who called me said the same thing of some variation of this is not sustainable. And I agree with that. Like, it's not sustainable for college sports, for the donors at big programs. Like, eventually, like, people are going to see they're not getting a return on money. It's just, there's so many things here that could happen in the next 5 years. I think it's though, and I do believe this. I think there's like a feeling at places like Rutgers. I'm not just saying at Rutgers, but I think at places like Rutgers where they're just, if they think they're going to wait this out, that's a poor strategy too. Right. Yeah. Like, I don't see anybody writing the people I respect, the national experts, saying, oh yeah, this is in 5 years from now, we're not going to have this anymore. Like, I don't see that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's unsustainable for a lot of places. Yes. If you depend on, small time donors to kind of pull their money together, I agree. If you're Arkansas and you have, Walmart backing you, I don't think Walmart's coffers are ever going to, dry up. If you're a Texas school with an oil baron alum who makes billions of dollars a year, I don't think his money's ever going to dry up either. And I don't think they're going to, and also, like, people have been donating money to schools for zero return for decades. I don't understand this idea that people are going to stop giving money. Like, when has that ever stopped these caviar eating donors at North Carolina and Michigan and Texas and Texas A&M and Arkansas and Miami from giving money?
Hey, we're a wine and cheese crowd at Carolina. We're not caviar. Okay, let's just get this clear. We're more of a brie cracker kind of. But yeah, you make a great point. There's just not that is something that's always, and it's the egos. It's like, why is the St. John's? Why is the vitamin water guy buying a basketball team for St. John's? Well, because he can, and B, I mean, I'm sure he's got a Hall of Fame coach kissing his tuchus several times a day, and that's ego. It's just one thing they can spend their money on. So yeah, I think you're right to suggest it is people who are saying this is unsustainable are correct, but not everywhere. In some places, it's going to be pretty sustainable. Exactly, and that's the problem. All right, this is a great question, and we don't know the answer to it, but we lost a 4-star recruit during the spring, and now Spencer. How can a fan get excited about the 2024 class coming next year when it can all fall apart in an instant? It's just a great point, because Rutgers is on the verge with Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. This is what, if you're a fan, this is what keeps you engaged. Like, all right, well, we are at the verge of a breakthrough. Like, that's where Rutgers, you felt like where Rutgers was, even with the end of last year. And I know I wrote that it was a step back, and it was a step back, but you feel like this is building towards something. Should Rutgers fans now, look at that differently? Like, the idea that this super class is just a phone call away from breaking up?
I will not tell fans how to live their fandom. I will say, here's my advice. If in July, when Dylan Harper allegedly is planning to commit somewhere, if he chooses Rutgers, I don't think Rutgers fans should withhold their excitement because he might not sign. I think people should be as excited as they were when Ace Bailey committed. That being said, I don't think anybody should start counting their chickens before they hatch and start buying Final Four tickets for 2025 until in November, Ace Bailey and maybe Dylan Harper and Delquan Warren and Lathan Somerville sign their letters of intent. As we saw with Bane Dongo, nothing's official until you sign your national letter of intent. And even when you do, these kids are be getting out of them at record pace, right? Like Mbako from Duke got out of his NLI and I was at Indiana, right? So even when you have them in the bag, you don't necessarily have them in the bag. It's very difficult. I guess the timeline is just being pushed back, and people should not be excited that players on their team until they literally see them in a Rutgers uniform on the first game of the season.
Yeah. Right. And don't count on them being the first day of the next season. That's the other part of it. Like, you enjoy them while they're there, because chances are they're going to move. This is the new era of college. You don't have them for 5 years. But I will say, to the original point about recruiting, like, this has always been, like, I don't know that this is any different. Like, if this were 1997 and you got Dylan Harper, are you really less worried then? Look, there's always been money out there for Dylan Harper. Like, that hasn't changed. I think one thing you have on your side is this family is not This is a different situation. This is someone whose son is an icon, so someone whose brother is an icon in the Rutgers program, a family that I can't say doesn't need the money, but is not motivated first and foremost by the opportunity to cash in here. That's been wired differently from the beginning. I mean, this kid playing at Don Bosco and not playing at some sports academy in Florida. Like, there's a million reasons to think that Dylan Harper and the Harper family is different than any other big name recruit. It's why they have a chance to begin with. So I would keep that in mind when you're thinking about this. That said, yeah, I mean, there are no guarantees in recruiting, even after they've signed these days. So get used to that. That's going to be part of the fandom.
Sure. And I would say that basketball recruiting used to be pretty solid. If a kid committed somewhere, he was staying committed. That has obviously changed a bit recently, as Rutgers fans have learned. So that's I think that's where there's some pause there. And look, I'll say this, like, the hardcore members of the Rutgers fan base, they survived the Eddie Jordan era. They survived 30 years without an NCAA tournament. I can understand the fear of kind of losing interest here. I think you'll be in the rack in November and December. Let's be real here. All right. Like, it'll be tough. A lot of these people will be there.
Right. And also keep in mind, during the old era, your team went 30 years without getting into the NCAA tournament. So it's not like, well, we had it wired back then. Like, these changes are screwing with us. No, the system was in place for 30 years. And so just, have a little perspective there. All right. So a lot of questions, and I don't know if you can answer any of these, Brian, but I'll give it a shot. A lot of questions like, where can we get the money? Like, Todd in Little Egg Harbor wants to know, if 10 million is needed right now, that only grow, how can average fans with disposable income help get to that level? How is that sustainable? Anthony from Rockaway, heard that other schools are redirecting advertising revenue to NIL. Have to think that's going on, and we should start. I hadn't heard that one, Anthony. That's interesting.
I'm not sure that's illegal.
Right. And Peter in Palm City says, do you think network executives are going to be happy spending millions when all of these TV sets are turned off at halftime when we play Ohio State? Whew, okay. So his point being, the system will change, driven by the TV revenue, because TV revenue drives everything. All right. Lots to unpack there, but I guess, the first part, the TV money, let's go there. I just don't, Rutgers has been trailing at halftime by 42 points to Ohio State forever. And they got the biggest TV contract of all time. So I don't know that NIL money changes, but people want to watch this.
Who is turning the game off at halftime?
I mean, I've tried many times when I'm there, but
the 50,000 Rutgers fans, or maybe are the 10 million people watching for Ohio State turning it off, or the 20 million gamblers who have Ohio State minus 14.5, are they turning it off?
14.5.
When Rutgers was god awful and losing, like you said, losing these games on a weekly basis, that didn't really hurt the TV revenue. People are going to watch college sports no matter what. All right. Like, and the hardcore portion of the fan base makes up a fraction of a percentage of the entire, college sports watching industrial complex, right? Like,
right.
The TV execs are doing just fine.
Yeah. And by the way, just like with the NFL, like, this free agency is just more attention. It's just more attention, something else to talk about at ESPN in May. So it's just another thing that just makes college football a year-round sport. So keep that in mind too. This is not necessarily a bad thing for attention and eyeballs. I think most people agree it's not great for college sports in general, college football in general, for all this movement. But it's, we're talking about it. The other part. So Anthony, just about, directing advertising revenue. I don't know if that's possible. Then this is only tangentially related, but it just popped in my head. Greg Schiano had said something on a podcast recently about college athletes unionizing, and he was in favor of that. And I just think that's like an interesting side of it, like that athletes were going to start to have to protect themselves as well for what's happening here. That they might need some formal way to make sure they get this money too, to keep them from getting screwed. So, like, there's another side of it as well. I don't know if did you hear Schiano's comments about that?
I did, and I think it's a very interesting concept, and I think it would, in an ideal world where it happens, would be beneficial to college athletes. I'm not entirely sure the structural changes that would need to, like, would college athletics need to be separated from universities? Would college athletes be treated as workers, employees? How would that affect their student status? It's a whole complicated web that I haven't really thought through, but I heard the comments, and I think he's right. I think eventually, when this all gets sorted out, that might be the best solution.
All right, and we got one funny one. First of all, thanks to CJ and Baskerville, someone else who came up with Spencer for Hire. Appreciate that. But the other podcast, can we even call them the Rutgers? Is that even a podcast anymore? Do they read? I don't think they record podcasts. But it was a funny question. If you could come up, what fast food restaurant is Rutgers in the grand scheme of the pecking order? I think that's a good topic. Like, what would you put if you had to name one fast food restaurant that would summarize what Rutgers is? What would it be?
This is incredibly difficult to come up with on the spot.
Yeah, of course.
Do you have an answer?
Well, I mean, I was thinking, of course, I spent all weekend thinking about this. Not really, but I think it's kind of like, I want to go kind of like a Burger King situation, right? Like it's just like it's always there, a solid option that's always there. But I don't know if you're like, hey, let's go to Burger King. You know what I'm talking about? That might be where I end up. Burger King.
Is there a fast food place that like originated the hamburger, but is either out of business or very low on the totem pole?
You mean like the first fast food place? I don't know. That's a great question. Like Roy Rogers. That's a good, like everyone loved Roy Rogers situation, but now no one can get Roy Rogers. I don't know.
But did Roy Rogers ever have a dynasty? I'm being very careful here because I don't want to, McDonald's is like the Ohio State, right? They were one of the first, and they've been great for generations. Right.
Yeah, but that's a problem too. That's problematic because if you're going to say Ohio State, I mean, McDonald's sucks. Like no one wants to eat McDonald's. Like that, is that a fair comparison for Ohio State? They're like a high level of excellence. To lump them in with McDonald's. I get what you're saying. They are the powerhouse though, so maybe that's fair.
I would even say maybe McDonald's is the Alabama of fast food.
There you go. Just unavoidable. Yeah, that's good. It's just an unavoidable, always there. People are always going to get it. Yeah, I think that's probably a good level there. Alabama is McDonald's.
Everyone hates them, but they still dominate, and the people that like them really like them.
Yeah. I mean, you can make the Jersey Mike's comparison for Rutgers. It's just kind of a factor in this area, but then I see it other places too.
It is a flawed question if you ask me.
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell is Clemson.
Okay.
Taco Bell is
because it gives you the runs, but is that what?
Very nice.
White Castle. What's the White Castle lookout sports?
I love White Castle. Quick and dirty.
You really?
I love White Castle.
Dirty. Florida State.
Get a crave case and just go to town on those 30 mini hot hamburgers.
In and out. That's UCLA. This is like someone at Bleacher Report's going to do this tomorrow. And I'm like, I should have done that story.
Who's the guy that makes all those bogus lists that people get so mad about?
You mean to tell me there's only one guy doing that? Is that what you mean to tell me? It's like there's an entire cottage industry of that guy making those bogus lists.
It's incredible. It's incredible how confused people get with that stuff. Like
I've made a few over the years. Great question. I don't know. Send in your comments. What fast food restaurant is Rutgers? That's good. We could do the whole hierarchy. Someone should do it for the entire Big Ten. Like, what is Michigan like a Subway? Just kind of like a basic meal that you can get anywhere that you're never excited about. Is that like a Michigan meal?
Michigan's high end stuff. No, they're high. They're lowbrow food with highbrow perception. Like they got Chipotle. It's fast casual. That's not a great comparison, but I'm trying to think of like they're like a Fridays, they're like a sit down place, but you're still eating fast food.
Right. Yeah. I think Indiana would be White Castle because every time I eat it, I want to throw up all over my shoes. Boom. That's a good one, right? All right, There you go. That's our best stab at that.
I think this segment has run its course. Much like White Castle will run its course through you if you haven't.
Exactly. All right. That's all I got from questions. Thanks for asking. Do we have any other topic? Anything else going on? Football recruiting?
They got big time wide receiver out of Division II. Kid
that is a huge story. Yes. Tell me about him.
Yeah, Jaquay Jackson is a D2 All-American, a guy they pursued for about a month. They had him on a visit originally, I believe, and then he went to Miami and I believe A&M or Colorado, a bunch of schools that are very active in the NIL market, and he chose Rutgers because he's motivated to make it to the NFL, and he believes that Greg Schiano and Dave Brock, who are guys that were in the NFL, have NFL experience, have sent guys to the NFL, can take him there. And it helps that Rutgers has an enormous hole at the top wide receiver spot that he can fill in from day one. Gives Gavin Wimsatt a weapon that he desperately needs. And I think the next step here is if they can get an offensive tackle, they would get him out of the portal, maybe upgrade at safety. But they made a huge addition with Jaquay Jackson, beat out some big schools. And they'll hope that he is their first big-time wide receiver since maybe Bo Melton. I would argue maybe Leonte Carew was their last true big elite wide receiver. Maybe that's a bit of the big aspirations to put on the kid, but I think that's that'll go a long way in helping this offense.
And it's just an encouraging, like a threefold encouraging thing. Like this, the first part about this being that he walks on campus as like the second most important player in the program behind the quarterback. I mean, that's how huge it was to get a big name receiver. The other part of it is like he could have gone to Miami, and I'm sure gotten more cash. Like this is going back to you could have gotten more cash there, but he's recognizing that he has 1 year to do this and he can't sit behind 6 other guys. So this is still like, what does Rutgers have to offer? It's the same thing Rutgers has always had to offer, an opportunity. So this kid's coming here knowing that he's going to get, I mean, assuming they throw the ball 15 times a game, he's going to get, a bunch of targets. He's going to have a chance to showcase himself, and that he's betting on himself. So that's good news for Rutgers. Recruiting in general seems like it's been pretty good news for Greg Shannon. I saw Todrick today had him in the top 30, top 35 right now for that class 2024.
Sounds about right. And they're having a lot of kids coming in next month on a bunch of official visits, and they're in it with a lot of top highly touted kids in the area in New York. They're going out to they offered a kid from North Carolina. It seems like they're really spreading their footprint around the country. Mm-hmm. And again, as we've established, it's not over till it's over, but they are in it for a lot of kids. And if they can lock up some of these kids and get commitments over the next month or so, they'll continue on a pretty good pace in the 2024 class. And then hopefully in December for them, they'll be able to close out and get those signatures. But they're in a good spot. I would say that they're in a good spot right now as far as recruiting, and whether they're in a good spot for the 2023 season. They're in a better spot with Jaquay Jackson. How much better? I guess we'll see in August.
All right. Anything else?
I mean, I mentioned it before, but Coquise Washington is crushing it on the recruiting trail and has completely flipped that roster. It's very impressive. Got a couple of big-time transfers, got a couple of strong high school recruits, 4-star 2023 signee they got last week.
Really?
Yeah. A girl kind of came out of nowhere, but she rebuilt that roster. She had an impressive first year with very limited resources as far as having 8 players to work with. And now that she's added some depth and brought some players back, I think she could be in a position to have a really, really, really strong second year. So that's a program that we harp on a lot of what has going wrong at Rutgers. I think that's a program that deserves some shine for the things they've done. And to go back to the negative side, baseball, they're in a tough spot. They're going to have to win the Big Ten tournament to make the NCAA tournament. They lost 2 of 3 games against Minnesota this past weekend, much like the basketball team suffered a devastating loss to Minnesota on the road. Baseball lost 2 brutal games to Minnesota, who is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. So they're really a Big Ten tournament or bust to make it into the NCAA tournament in Steve Owen's 4th year.
People play baseball in Minnesota. It's interesting.
They do. And they're not very good at it, but good enough to beat Rutgers, I guess.
Okay. Well, there you go. All right. That's a good place to end. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Devco for sponsoring us and sponsoring a lot of the NIL athletes. Appreciate you listening. We'll be back, I don't know, soon, eventually, hopefully, with some good news to talk about. Until then, thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.